Welcome to Tabletop Tommies Tutorials, helping new and existing players get to grips with Bolt Action 3rd edition. I'm Phil, and in this video I'll be looking at how morale, orders and commanders work in Bolt Action 3rd edition. I'll start with a quick overview of morale and modifiers to morale, before looking at some of the key changes to the interactions between morale, orders and commanders, which I believe will have an impact on how the game is played in this edition. The core mechanics around morale will be familiar to those who have played previous versions of Bolt Action. Each unit in the game is rated as either inexperienced, regular or veteran, and has a base morale value of 8, 9 and 10 respectively. This morale value can be modified both up and down during the game, through the impact of pins, losses to key personnel, and the influence of commanders. For every pin a unit has, its morale value is temporarily reduced by 1, which will have an impact on whether it has to take a test to successfully be given an order, as well as the value needed to pass a morale check. Infantry and artillery units that lose their NCO or leader, such as through being removed from sniper fire, will suffer a permanent -1 to their morale value. The same is true for command units when the platoon or company commander is removed. It's a good idea to mark the NCOs and leaders in an easily identifiable way, such as with a pointing arm, a map, different headgear, or something different on their base. A unit may have its morale value increased through the influence of commanders. Units within 6 inches of a platoon commander gain a +2 modifier to their morale, whilst units within 12 inches of a company commander gain a +4 modifier. Note that these are not cumulative and only the highest modifier is applied. Now, regardless of any modifiers, the highest morale value is 11 and the lowest is 2. So, when taking a check against the morale value, a roll of a double 1 is always a pass and a double 6 is always a fail. Broadly speaking, orders in Bolt Action 3rd edition are exactly the same as previous editions. Each unit must be given an order before acting, and there is a choice of the following 6 orders. They can be given a fire order, where they fire at full effect without moving, an advance, where they can move at their advance rate and then fire, a run, which allows them to move at double speed without firing and is also used for assaulting. They can be placed into ambush, where they will remain stationary and wait for the opportunity to fire during the rest of the turn. They can be given a rally order, where, if successful, they will lose all current pin markers, or they can be ordered down. Again, they remain stationary, and they gain an extra +2 cover save modifier. Now, we'll look at some of these orders in more detail in future videos, covering shooting assaults and vehicles. Other than for some specific unit special rules, such as the one-man turret or shirker special rule, if a unit does not have 1 or more pin markers when it's giving an order, the order is automatically passed, i.e. no check is required. However, if a unit does have 1 or more pin markers, or there's a relevant special rule, the unit must successfully pass an order test. To do so, the unit must roll equal to or under its current morale value, calculated from its base morale and any additional modifiers that apply. If successful, remove 1 pin marker, place the order dice next to the unit with the relevant order face up, and carry out the unit's actions for that turn. Be aware that certain situations, unit special rules and national characteristics may permit a unit to re-roll a failed order check, such as if the unit is at full strength, as shown in the relevant unit entry in the full selection section of the main rulebook, or it has a national characteristic, such as the Banzai charge for the Japanese or Up and Atom for the British. If, when taking an order check, the check is failed, the unit must execute a down action. What this entails will depend on the unit type, visibility of other enemy units, and so on. Now, there are 2 orders that aren't impacted by pin markers. Firstly, a down order may always be successfully issued without a unit needing to test. Secondly, if a unit is ordered to rally, an order test must still be taken, but it is not modified by pin markers. It can, however, be modified if the unit has lost its NCO or leader, or if there is a commander within range to apply a positive modifier. When making an order test, there are 2 results to be aware of. An unmodified result of 2 represents incredible courage, and this means the unit automatically passes the order and removes all current pin markers, whilst an unmodified result of 12 is a fail and requires the player to roll on the foobar table. Now, this is slightly changed from the previous edition, where it's more likely that you might have friendly fire incidents. And the other thing to look at is the panic. As before, if you do suffer from panic, you do have to run away. However, in 3rd edition, you have to move as fast as possible towards the closest table edge, and if the unit moves into contact with the edge, it flees the battlefield and counts as destroyed. Typically, orders will not carry over from one turn to the next. There are, however, 2 exceptions to this. Firstly, a unit that has not activated its ambush order may decide at the end of the turn either to retain the order into the next turn, in which case they keep their dice next to them and it is not returned to the dice bag, or it may attempt to fire at the end of that current turn. If that's the case, a roll of 4+ is required, otherwise the fire order is not executed and the dice is returned to the bag. Now it may be the case that there's one or more units on both sides who wish to attempt to fire rather than retain their ambush order. If this is the case, I suggest putting the relevant dice in the bag and drawing them in turn to determine the order in which the units get to activate. As currently in the rules, it is not specified how to resolve this situation. The other order that can be carried through to the next turn is the down order. A unit which is down may choose to retain that order into the next turn, and, if it does so, it automatically removes all pin markers at the end of the current turn, but obviously it may not activate in the following turn as it remains down. Now, we will look in more detail at how pins work in the video on shooting, but it should be obvious that with rally orders removing all pins, and down orders which are retained into the next turn also removing all pins, it is now easier to make a unit combat effective by removing pins in one go. However, this is offset by how easy it is to receive a pin in 3rd edition with the changes to shooting and to hit modifiers. One of the key changes to this edition concerns commanders, both in terms of their increased presence within army lists and their ability to influence the action on the tabletop. I think it is fair to say that commanders in previous editions were a bit hit and miss, and, on the whole, were seen as a tax to allow players to take additional platoons and open up more options for their force rather than being used proactively on the tabletop. However, I think we will see a change in how they are used in 3rd edition, because they allow the player to mitigate the increased prevalence of pins, as well as setting up multiple actions through the use of their U-Men Snap to Action ability. A further key change concerns how commanders may use their abilities from inside transports, especially for soft-skinned and open-topped vehicles, where their abilities extend outside of the transport to nearby units. So we can see on the officer bonuses table that we now only have 2 types of commanders, platoon commanders and company commanders. Platoon commanders give a +2 morale bonus, may issue 2 extra orders, and their influence range is 6 inches, whereas a company commander gives a +4 morale bonus, may issue 4 extra orders, and has a range of 12 inches. As in previous editions, officers may elect to activate other units when they themselves are successfully given an order. To be able to issue orders to other units, a command unit must first successfully pass its own order, and, having done so, it may choose to take either 2 or 4 additional dice from the bag and issue them to units within range. For German players, you benefit from an additional order to these because of the Blitzkrieg special rule. Now it's worth noting that when using this U-Men Snap to Action ability, you need to allocate the orders to all of the units you are going to activate before any of them activate themselves, although you are free to choose in what sequence you activate these units. Now there are some restrictions as to who can snap to other units. Platoon commanders cannot snap to other platoon commanders or company commanders, but they themselves can be snapped to by company commanders. However, if a platoon commander is activated from a snap to order from a company commander, the platoon commander may not themselves issue snap to orders to further units. Let's take a moment just to look at how these different changes combine together. It opens up, for example, possibilities for mechanized assaults. Commanders can now elect to use this ability to give an order to themselves, the vehicle they are travelling in, and a unit inside that vehicle, which then sets up situations such as advancing the vehicle towards an enemy unit, disembarking with a unit inside the vehicle and shooting an enemy unit at point-blank range before the officer themselves advances out and finishes off the enemy unit if required. Additionally, a commander placed in close proximity to indirect firing HE units will be able to set up multiple units firing before the opponent has a chance to draw a dice and react. Alternatively, tank commanders may snap to other vehicles, allowing for one vehicle to be placed on ambush and the other vehicle to declare a shot, for example at an opponent's recce vehicle, which forces a decision from the opponent. Does the opponent stay put and risk being shot, or do they undertake an escape reaction and run the risk of triggering the ambush? Another way in which I think we'll see commanders having more of a role on the tabletop is their ability to keep units moving, even when the pins mount up. The ability of a platoon commander to add a +2 modifier to a unit's order test means players may be more inclined to try and activate a unit with 3 pins, whereas in previous editions the risk of doing so with no commander modifying the roll often meant such a unit would be issued a down order or a rally order to try and clear some pins. One tactic I've been getting good results from in my game so far has been to group together a commander with 2 or 3 units. By having the commander in close proximity to these units, I can keep them moving through their commander's modifier for order checks, reduce the chance of the units failing morale checks when in proximity to the commander, and setting up multiple activations with the U-Men Snap to Action ability. Furthermore, a 3-man command unit, armed with SMGs or assault rifles, can also be very useful in its own right to finish off enemy units. Hopefully it should be clear that in Bolt Action 3rd edition, the usefulness of commanders on the battlefield has increased significantly from previous versions. Whilst I think there is still a place for the solo inexperienced officer hiding out of sight behind dense terrain, whose purpose is to open up another platoon in the cheapest possible way, I do think such a ploy is not fully embracing their potential. I'll be interested to know what you think and how you've been getting on using your commanders in your games. If you're thinking of adding to your Bolt Action army, why not use one of our affiliate links, available in the description below. Anything that comes back to us goes straight into making more content for the channel. If you want to stay up to date with all of our videos, do please subscribe, and if you think others would find this video useful, why not give it a like and a share. Ta-ta for now.